Airtable AI just hit general availability, meaning you can now access these new features. We were really eager to talk about this for a long time, but the terms of the closed beta said we couldn't talk about it, so now we're going to dig into all the really exciting new features. Hi, I'm Dan Lehman from AutomationHelpers.com, and we help companies get automated with portals, apps, and integrations. Now, all the big YouTubers would say, save the most exciting parts for the end, but I can't help it. I'm too giddy about these features. I'm really pumped about what's happening with Airtable automations, so I want to talk about this first. Some of the other things like generating text with AI, I'm like, okay, it's going to be helpful for somebody, but I really think there's so much value in what can be done with automations. So the first thing I want to talk about is when you're looking at your automations and you see an action for generate with AI, it's not really that exciting looking. I mean, if you're used to ChatGPT, you're like, okay, well, there's a spot to put in a prompt and a couple settings about the model itself. So what's the big deal about this? Well, the part that makes it so powerful is that we can take inputs from previous steps like we would with any other automation step, and we can take the output and we can use that in additional steps later on. So let's walk through a use case. One of our clients manages logistics for a large fleet of shipping vessels, and these ships all have different names. Now, I just grabbed a random list of ship names because I don't know anything about ship names, but we put them here because what was happening is they have a log of communications coming in. And these communications we're writing from different sources. We've got from Twilio, we've got calls that are coming in, there could be text messages, there could be emails. And in these communications, they're referencing the names of these ships. So in a perfect world, we're writing in these communications, we'd be able to link the communication records with the ships that we have. But you can imagine the people who are working on these vessels aren't actually writing out the full name or talking about the full name of the ship. So we've got the HMS Dreadnought. Well, you're not necessarily going to call it the HMS Dreadnought every time. You just might reference it as the Dreadnought. So we wanted to use AI to see if we could match the name of the ship so that we could actually have that linked relationship. Now, you can, of course, do some sort of regular expressions to try to make stuff work out, but when the ships have different names, that becomes a little bit tricky. So let's go ahead and see this in action, the actual results, and then we'll dig into the automation itself. I'm just going to fill out a form, but again, this could come in from a variety of different data sources. So this, of course, is a terrible example, but the Dreadnought is lost at sea. Let's go ahead and submit our form. And back in Airtable, we can see our automation has just updated this. We have our record and it's updated this linked record to our ship. So now we can see the name of the HMS Dreadnought. It was able to find that linked record and create that relationship between both of those records. So how did we do this in the automation itself? Okay, so we have a trigger, really standard. We're just saying when a form's submitted, we could use a different trigger if we want. Now, the first step that we do, the first action here might appear to be a little bit counterintuitive. The first thing that we want to do is to find records, and we want to get all of the different ships that we have. It's pretty rare that you're asking for all of the records inside of Airtable. Normally, you're adding some sort of condition to this. In this case, we want to retrieve the list of all of the ships because we want to use that to feed into our prompt to say, hey, you've got this list in front of you, which is the closest one to what you're looking for. So now we have our generative step, and here's where we put in our prompt. I just put in a description. I said, okay, you've got a body of text, and a ship name is being mentioned. The ship might not be spelled the same way, but your job is to find the closest matched name and return the name. And then the body of text is, and this is where I'm able to pull in the attributes from the record. So I fed it the notes, the Dreadnought is lost at sea. And then we say, please find the closest ship name. Here's your list of ships to choose from. And this is where we're grabbing the list of records that we retrieved in the previous step. Now, I did a little bit of testing here, and I really wanted it to find the matched ship and then be able to return the record ID so we wouldn't have to do an extra step here. Now, unfortunately, it kind of gave me the standard ChatGPT response, like we've only been trained on data up to this point, and we can't give you an Airtable record ID. So maybe it's possible, maybe there's a different way to do it. I wasn't able to get it to do it, but in this case, this wasn't a problem because it was able to return the exact name since the exact name we retrieved here. And then all we need to do is another find record step. So now we can say where the name contains, and we can plug in that AI response. So from our previous step, we say, if there's a match on the name, that's the ship that we're going to return. And then we've got a little bit of conditional logic here to say, if the record's length equals 1, that means if you were able to find a ship, do this step. If you couldn't find a match, don't do it. If you found multiple matches, which we don't want, don't do it. But if you found exactly one match, then we want to proceed. We're going to update our record, and we're going to then link this to the corresponding ship that we retrieved the record in that step. Otherwise, if we didn't find a match or we found multiple matches, then we're going to update the record and we're just going to add a note and say we couldn't find the matched ship via AI. And of course, as we all know, AI isn't perfect, so there's going to be a number of times where it doesn't find that exact match. But even if it could help us out 60% of the time, that would still save a lot of time for the people who are triaging these requests coming in. So I hope you're as excited as I am about all the possibilities with Airtable's AI in automations, especially because we can take inputs, plug it into our prompts, we can take the response and do other things with it afterwards. So I think this really opens up a lot of new possibilities. Okay, so we've talked about how we can use AI in automations. Where else can we use it in the application? Well, if we take a look at the support article, it talks about different surfaces where we can use it. And surface is kind of an interesting name. So in Airtable, they can't say, what fields can we use this in, because they also work in automations. And we can't say what automations because it also works in fields. So we're using this word surfaces to describe different areas of the platform that we can utilize AI. So there's a few different areas. We talked about automations. There's also being able to use long text fields. And long text fields are going to be the predominant way that you'll be interacting with the generative AI capabilities. You can also summarize comments with AI. We can also do some record matching, specifically on linked records, and we can use it to help generate new formulas. Let's talk next about generating text. This, of course, is very table stakes for LLMs. This is the functionality that I would say is helpful, but really isn't surprising. This is what a lot of companies did that's very 2023, when all these companies came out with new features and it was really like, hey, we added a wrapper around ChatGPT and it does some stuff. This is kind of that level of things. I still think it can be very useful. It just, to me, isn't quite as exciting as using it in the automations. So you'll see that we've got a number of different long text fields here. And what we can do, if we go ahead and edit that field, we see that we can toggle on this generate text, which is going to give us these additional options here. Now you can click and edit these properties. In this particular one, we're generating a tweet, and this is a template that already knows in the background what a tweet is comprised of. I'm surprised they're using the word tweet. What's the word now? Is it Xeet? I don't know what it is. But anyways, generating a tweet, it probably already knows how many characters that you have available to it, maybe information about adding hashtags. And so really that information is already kind of in the background. You don't have to worry about it because it's baked into that template. So the most important thing here is identifying which field we're pulling from for our prompt information. So we've got this content description. You fill that out. That's what's going to give it the information it needs to be able to create the text here. We can also include additional fields that we want, and so you can select those and it will regenerate based on the information that you give it. You can add your own examples, so if you had certain kinds of tweets and you want to mimic that style, you could do that here, and you can give additional instructions. So really what this is doing is it's making it so that, unlike ChatGPT, where you give it some information, it comes back, you add to your prompt, it comes back. So instead of doing that, you can avoid all of that, because you're giving it that structure, kind of that metadata that lives behind the scenes so that you don't need to re-prompt every time. This, in effect, is essentially acting like a custom GPT. You're giving it all these instructions, and then it's taking the dynamic data, the prompt that you have in this content description, to use that to generate the text. Now, like we said, the long text fields have the majority of AI features attached to it to generate different kinds of text. There's some different examples we have here, like a press release and a LinkedIn post and things like that. You can create a new field, and in this, you'll see this new option to create an AI field. Well, it's not really an AI field. There's not a new field type here. Really, we're just choosing from existing things. So either you could create the long text field and then enable those AI settings, or you could simply click here and then you could say, let's generate text, which is then going to create that long text field. So it's really up to you, whichever is more convenient. Once this is toggled on, you can choose from either starting from a template or starting from scratch. If you start with a template, you've got some different options here that are categorized: general, product, marketing, UX, research, and recruiting. I'm always a little bit surprised about these categories, and they're doing this for the apps too. Like UX research is really specific in my mind, but that's a different story. So maybe you want to do a translation. This is one of the use cases they feature quite a bit here. We can click on that. You can choose what field you want to translate and then the language you want to translate it into. I'm kind of surprised this isn't a drop-down that you just put in free text what language it is. So I'm kind of curious why that is. And again, you could give it additional instructions. So pretty straightforward to use long text fields for the purpose of text generation. Next, we're going to take a look at it through the lens of being able to categorize information. So there's another base that Airtable created to help walk through some use cases. What's interesting here is for something like sentiment analysis, If we edit this field, we can see that this is using one of the templates. So this is already created, pretty standard if you want to understand if this is positive or negative. But if we take a look at something like priority, they're actually using a custom prompt here. So this is not a template. So this is where, just like ChatGPT, you could put in information, you could give it a broader description of what you want this to be. You can plug in the field itself that you're going to use for that feedback and give it that information so that it makes that selection of the output if it's low, medium, or high. Now, I have to say I'm really impressed with a lot of the features that Airtable AI has. The one thing that I'd really like to see is, why are we always having to use a long text field? So for example, if our output is low, medium, or high, just like formulas have outputs, I'd really like to see this maybe in a single select field that we could just update that data. We could say it's low, it's medium, or it's high. Instead, doing it as text, it's fine, but I'd really like to see it take advantage of more of the really nice field types that we have inside of Airtable. Now, if you're creating a record inline, I was kind of curious how this would handle it, because Airtable is so convenient to allow us to create inline records. But what it's doing is it creates the record right away, followed by a bunch of updates. And given that you only have certain limits around the amount of consumption you have of the AI features, I was like, oh man, is it going to make that query every single time that you're updating that record? Thankfully, it's not. So if we create this new record in line, we see these little text messages here. We can expand this. And you can see that it says, okay, generate text in order for this field to work. And so I don't want it to be every single keystroke that I'm typing in the feedback. So if I were to do it in line and I'm adding the keystroke, it's not going to make that query every single time. Notice that it now has that button for generate. So now if I were to update this value with a message and I click off, this has technically run an update, but I still need to press the button either in line here, or I could expand the record to generate that text. I think this is a good way to implement it because we're not suddenly racking up the bills so quickly, having it update every single time. So if I want the sentiment analysis from this, I can click generate, negative, our priority, we can click on that. And I'm always kind of interested, how do they determine priority? So in this case, it was high, and back in our prompt, we're able to see it summarizes high are critical issues affecting core functionality or a significant user base. So I don't know how it actually know if it affects a significant user base. It's not actually looking at the body of records. It's only looking at that individual record. So I don't think it would actually have the knowledge to know that. But in this case, because I can't log in and it's crashing, it's determined this is high priority. Now, another thing you can do if you're actively using the comments section in your records with your team is, if you have a whole stream of comments and you want to summarize it, there's a little button to be able to summarize the comments and display this information at the top of the screen. So here you can see a little bit of summary of what's going on. We want to bring in a partner to work on this, and here's our standard bill rate. So it's able to summarize the different comments that we have in that thread. Next, let's talk about creating a formula with AI. I'm just going to do a simple one here. We'll insert a field and we'll choose our formula field like normal, and you'll see this option to generate a formula. So I'm just going to give it a prompt here to find the difference in the number of days between the start and the deadline. Those are two different fields that I have here. Let's go ahead and generate, and you can see it now created our datetime diff function, show us the number of days. Let's go ahead and create that field, and we can now see the number of days. What's cool is that I used lowercase and it was still able to interpret it correctly. I didn't have to put that field name exactly as is. Let's try actually with a typo just to see if we mistype it. So I'm going to delete this. Let's copy the description that we generated. We'll click on generate formula again, paste this in, and let's just make a typo here, deadline, and see if it comes up with it. Press generate, and it still worked for us. So that's pretty cool. Now, some of you have really, really complex formulas, so it'll be interesting to see how it holds up, but I found that I have pretty good success by typing that in and getting the result that I'm looking for. Now, the last AI feature here that I think is also pretty powerful is being able to recommend the appropriate linked record. So I'm inside of a project management solution looking at some tasks. If I click on this assignee field, this is not assigned to, it's not using the users inside of Airtable. This is actually pulling from a separate table of people or of contacts. If I edit this field, there's this option to use AI to show the top matches when selecting a record. So this is not something that actually happens in the background. It's as you're trying to assign this and it opens it up, it's going to pop up with the recommended choices. And so it allows us to choose the fields that are important for it to take a look at, both fields from the task, which is kind of the core record, and then the assignee, it's looking to the people record. So on the task, I wanted to look at the region as well as the role assigned to that task. And on the people table, we wanted to look at the role that they're assigned, as well as the region. Quick note that you can only use up to 3 fields here. Now, I'm kind of curious if you concatenated some of that text together, how it would do, but it might mess with your training data. So I think a little bit more experimentation needs to be done there. So on my people table, I've got my role or the function in the company that they're performing, and then we also have the region that they're located in. So on my tasks, I created a new task, and we've got it assigned to this Quantum Leap, which is based in LATAM. And we're saying that this is a task that needs to be completed by product. So if I click on the field here and open this, this is where we see this top matches, and it's sorting it in order of who it thinks are the top matches that are available for this. Now, at first I was a little bit surprised because remember, this is for product and LATAM. So why does it come up with Omar, who, yes, he's part of product, but he's in APAC? So I think this really comes down to your training data. What I was kind of hoping it would do would be to recognize that we have an association between the regions and roles and just be able to identify that we have someone who's in LATAM here. Let me go back over to my people. And so out of the product people, we've got Aria, who is in LATAM here. So I think she should be the top of the list of who it recommends. However, because she had not actually been assigned a task yet, and so wasn't part of the training data, it didn't actually recognize that she was the best fit for it. Now I've added a record and it's LATAM and it's assigned to Aria. So we've got this association. And if I open up the record, who does it recommend? No, it's someone in EMEA. So I don't want to be overly critical here because, of course, if we had a large amount of data, this might be able to better detect what we're looking for. But I just say this to bring up some of the risks of overly relying on AI is that you need more data in order for it to make certain assumptions. It's not able to say, oh, hey, we're looking at these attributes, and so we can infer what it should be based on the attributes. It's because you've got a volume of data going through the back end of the system. I'd be curious, those of you who have been using this extensively already, if you found that it has pretty good accuracy for your use case. Now, at this point, you're probably wondering, how do I get my hands on Airtable AI? There's a limited time free offering, and so you can get these 500 credits to be able to test it out. But my assumption is by using that language of limited time, that this will go away, that it's essentially a free trial because they're really trying to push everybody to this paid plan. Now, this is available if you're on team, business, or enterprise. It's going to be $6 per seat per month if you go the annual option, or else $7 a month. This is all credit-based, so you get 3,500 monthly AI credits per seat. Now, it's important to understand that if you're on team or business, you have to buy it for everybody in your workspace. You can't just say, hey, I'd really like to make it available to these 5 users and these 10 users don't need access. Now, I do want to mention that a lot of the functionality that we've seen, such as what we're doing in automations, could be accomplished by making a direct call with OpenAI's API. And you could send information, you could retrieve information, you could make updates yourself, you could do things with generating text. Now, it's really convenient to have it all within the application, to have it supported by Airtable, and at $6-7 a month, it's a pretty good deal. But for those of you who are like, I'm already paying so much in Airtable licensing, there are other options if you want to use this feature sparingly. Now, they do give some suggestions here. This would be enough to do unlimited formulas, but how often are you going to be creating formulas? Like, it's probably a couple people who are doing the building and they need access to that. Unlimited suggested matching records. Again, that was helpful because you're probably doing that one in bulk. 70 blog posts or 350 translations. So it gives you an idea of how many credits this is going to cost, but it's still a little bit hard to wrap your mind around. Now, I'm on the business plan, so I have this admin panel. This is going to look a little bit different for you if you're on the team plan. But here, if you're on business, I've got integrations and development, which is under settings. And so here's where you actually enable the AI features. And it's also where you can view the AI credit usage. You can expand this and it tells you how many credits that you've used of that supply. So I'm just testing this in this workspace. I've just been working on this video this evening and showing a couple of examples, and I've burned through 24% of that. Of course, normally it would be on the paid plan and 3,500 credits. So you can start to get a little flavor of like, okay, well, we saw these examples and it's burning through that many. Now, if you do think you're going to burn through those credits, there are options to be able to purchase additional credits. And so these credits are done in bulk. You can see the pricing with each of those tiers. I'm curious to hear which AI features are most exciting to you and how it's going to assist you in your workflow. If you have any questions about your own Airtable setup, don't hesitate to reach out to our website at automationhelpers.com, where we're offering free 30-minute consultations.